Hi, this is the first time I've seen a MIDI controller do this. The new Electra 1 Mini is based on a larger format controller from the same company, which has been around for a while. First, a bit of context. I was initially attracted to the Electra 1 MIDI controller over 4 years ago because finally someone made a MIDI controller where you could actually see at all times the full names of the parameters it controlled and their value. A major added bonus was the fact that Electra 1 hosted a community-driven library of presets, so if you want to use it with your synth, there's a good chance someone already mapped out a preset for it. Over the years, quite a few interesting features were added, like snapshots and morphing between snapshots, but perhaps more importantly, the ability for users to run code on it and access its graphics, which opens the door for creative sequencers and MIDI effects. In this video, I'll take a closer look at both. I'll also show you how I created this generative sequencer using AI without writing a single line of code, and then talk about pros and cons compared to the competition. Before I start, a quick disclosure, Electra 1 sent me these controllers. Other than that, no money changed hands. They have no say over the content of this video and don't get to see it before it's published. Okay, let's start with an overview, and just to make sure everyone is on the same page, these are MIDI controllers, meaning they don't make any sounds on their own, rather they process or generate MIDI commands that you use to control external hardware or software instruments. And they can send out notes, CCs, sysecs, pretty much any form of MIDI except 2.0, which means it can't communicate with press releases. Since their screens have high-resolution graphics, they not only show you the full parameter's name and value, they also support a number of built-in visual control styles, including envelopes, dials, bipolar controls, and lists with custom graphics if you like. And if you use the built-in scripting language, you can draw on screen pretty much anything you like. Besides downloading presets from their webpage, you can also create your own by simply dragging and dropping different elements onto the screen, onto the editor, and editing their parameters using the web-based editor. The editor also lets you edit Lua code and debug it, and there's a MIDI monitor for troubleshooting any issues. In terms of DAW integrations, the company doesn't provide any built-in. However, a few third parties have written integrations for it for Ableton Live, Bitwig and Reaper, and even VCVRAC, and an excellent preset for the Continuum. You can, of course, map any CC to control any other DAW, but the dynamic integrations will let you control specific devices as you swap devices on your computer, as well as, depending on the integration, control the mixer, EQs, sends, and a host of other things. In terms of build, both controllers feel very solid and sturdy. The knobs are endless encoders on both. The ones on the Mini are a bit lighter to the touch. I prefer them actually, and the ones on the Mark II are a little bit more sturdy, but still very usable. I also like the distance between the knobs here. More than here. Here they're a little bit too tight. The screens are LCDs, not OLEDs, so they're best viewed from above and lose a bit of contrast from an angle, especially the screen on the Mini, which is a bit darker. The Mark II doesn't come with a stand, but I bought these little two kickstands on Amazon and they work great on the bottom. The stand my Mini came with is part 3D printed, part real wood, and I'm told future production units may not come with it. The knobs on both controllers are capacitive touch knobs. This screen is not a touch screen, whereas this screen is, so you can edit parameters by simply touching the screen and swiping left and right. Both controllers work in similar ways. However, presets made on one are not immediately compatible with presets made on the other. You need to convert them manually. I'll show you how later. There are also quite a few other differences, so let's dive into the details and talk about them along the way. Let's start on the hardware side. The Electra 1 Mark II, which I'll just call the Mark II going forward, has 12 encoders and 6 totally configurable buttons, whereas the Mini has only 8 encoders and 6 buttons, only 4 of which are configurable for each preset. That said, the encoders on the Mini are push encoders. So for example, you use them, say, to select presets or to dive in to edit multi-parameter controls. So you could arguably say that the Mini has 8 more buttons than the Mark II. That said, the screen on Mark II is a 7-inch touchscreen, so you could long press a control to edit its parameters, either using the touchscreen or using the adjacent encoders, whereas the 5-inch screen on the Mini isn't a touchscreen. The touchscreen, by the way, is okay, but it's not quite like your phone's screen. There is a bit of lag and sometimes no response, but overall it's okay. You can use a long press to open up lists of parameters and scroll through lists if they don't fit. You can also add an XY pad style controller to the Mark II to control 2 parameters at a time. You can also swipe down from the right, middle, or top left. The gesture doesn't always work. The center swipe gives you access to the different pages, and the left swipe access to different control types. You only see 8 parameters per page on the Mini, 4 more if you count the buttons, whereas you see up to 36 parameters per page on the Mark II. The 12 knobs control 12 parameters per row, and you select the row using the buttons here on the left, and then control the parameters in that row. Or if you don't want to select the row, just touch a control to edit it. Now, when I mentioned you only control 8 continuous parameters per page or 36 continuous parameters per page on these, that's not entirely true. You actually get to see a bit more. So for example, for envelopes, you're seeing, depending on the envelope, 4 or more parameters. There's also a 4 fader control, which is a bit small in the Mark II. That lets you control 4 parameters, and you can see those on screen. There's a version of that here as well. So we're certainly seeing more than 8 parameters at a time here. You only control 1 at a time using the knobs, same here. However, there's a shortcut, so instead of diving in to control these 4 parameters, if you touch a parameter and hold context, you can move between the different parameters using the previous and next button, and then you're in control of that parameter. Same goes here. Say if we choose this row, so by default, I'm only controlling this 1 parameter of my 4-stage envelope, but I can touch this and use these 2 buttons to go back and forth between different parameters. So it's up to you. Either use the pop-up with a long press or with a press, or stick with the bird's eye view. Often a synth you're controlling will have more parameters that can fit on one page. Each preset can have multiple pages of parameters. So this, for example, is a Community Virus TI preset, and as you can see, it's got a bunch of pages, each page with up to 36 parameters. So this is pretty comprehensive. Same goes here. Each page, say here for the Evil Pet patch, can have 8 knob parameters and 4 button parameters. Here, some of these link to pages and some say to a sustain command, but you can have these control other parameters, like for example, in my MK2 Tombola preset. So here we're controlling the number of notes and lifespan and giving balls a boost or changing the scale. Groups of presets live in banks, and there are 5 banks on the Mini, so up to 40 presets in total, and 6 banks on the Mark II. Each bank with up to 12 presets, so that's 72 presets in total on board the Mark II. Once you've loaded up a preset, you can store snapshots of its parameter values and also morph between snapshots. To store a snapshot, and I'll move these to 0 just to store an extreme snapshot. Anyway, to store a snapshot, you go into the snapshots page, hit save, and pick a slot, and it can take a while, and then go back and change the parameters again. Let's go to the extreme. You know what? I'll show you why, but let's take these only halfway to the extreme. Anyway, go back into snapshots, hit save current, and press here. This takes a while. Okay, so as you can see, we can store quite a few snapshots, and we've got even banks of snapshots. The snapshots on the top 2 rows are special because we can morph between them. So I can morph from A to B and back, and you can see all the controls change respectively. So you can morph between pairs, and you can also randomize the values of 2 pairs just by turning the second encoder of the encoder pair. You can also just recall a snapshot by hitting load and choosing one or the other. The Mini, by the way, also has snapshots. So remember, I told you these 2 buttons are fixed. If we hit the context button and then go into snapshots, it works exactly the same way, only fewer snapshots. So you've got 8 banks here. You can morph between them or randomize just like the Mark II. And you've got 8 banks of 8 snapshots each. So 64 snapshots here compared to 12 banks here. So 432 snapshots on the Mark II. Okay, let's move on. Remember I said this knob randomizes the range of the 2 snapshots. And that's why I had set the range initially not all the way up for some of the parameters so that you can see the randomization isn't completely random for all the parameters, but it stays within the range of the two snapshots. However, both controllers also have a totally random randomize, and you need to press this down to show that you really mean it. But yeah, that works. Let's do it one more time. Long press and release to randomize. Notice that it also randomized the device on off. There's a similar function here. So if we go back into over here, we can randomize presets with a push of a button. Both controllers also support the concept of captures. These may look like snapshots, but these are used to capture sysx dumps. You can record them and then play them back through any one of the capture slots. And there are banks here and banks here as well. Moving on, both controllers support the concept of pinning a preset. Now, I may not be using it correctly here, but basically once you pin a preset, it'll keep running in the background and you can go on to other presets. Here we go. For example, this preset will give me control of Evil Pet. Now, unfortunately, when I enable it, as you can hear, the note got stuck and the tombola stopped spinning. So this is either a bug or user error. Anyway, I now have control over Evil Pet, while allegedly or supposedly, my tombola should be spinning. Regardless, you can see that as I move the filter cutoff knob, the LED on Evil Pet changes as well. Moving on, in terms of connectivity, both are powered by USB Type B and also send MIDI back and forth on that port. Both also have a USB Type A jack to connect to a USB MIDI device. Besides the common USB jacks, the two are different connectivity-wise. The Mark II has 4 full-size MIDI ports, 2 in and 2 out, whereas the Mini has 2 MIDI jacks, one for in and another for out, and it comes with dongles in the box. Okay, so up until now I covered ways in which the controllers are similar. There are a few features that are Mark II exclusives, at least as of this firmware version. First, performances are a way to set up a page that's dedicated to controlling parameters that you can select and customize. These are all customizations you can do on the controller itself, as opposed to creating the actual presets, which is something you need to do with a computer. To create your own performance, you swipe down from the top left and hit Edit Mode. In this preset, the performance page is empty. To add a control to the performance page, just long press the slot you want to add a control to, and then hit Add Control Reference. You can then choose the page and choose the control. Let's just go for cutoff, add control. And we now have this control that references the one on the other page. That's this guy over here, the cutoff. And as you could see, a long press also lets you add a macro, which lets you control multiple parameters at a time. So you just hit add control. Let's go for this one. Let's add another one and go for, say, VCO2 frequency and add another one and go for envelope amount. You can also choose one of several control modes, for example, to map a mod source or a pipe to control a parameter. I didn't explore these, but you can read up on them in the manual. Anyway, once you're done, you can name the macro or just add it. And we've got a macro control for multiple parameters. So that's one feature currently at least not supported on the Mini. And then another feature is devices. So the idea here is that a preset can control multiple devices, and then you'd go in to edit a device and then choose which port you want a device to send data to and which channel you want a device to communicate on, and that is regardless of how the preset was designed. You can't point presets to different ports or channels on the Mini. Again, at least not yet. I think that's something they need to add. Another Mark II exclusive is routing. This lets you connect or disconnect various sources to various destinations. And then the Electra one also lets you reassign these buttons on the device itself. There's also an assign buttons function over here, which lets you assign these buttons to Luo macro functions. You can also perform many of these configurations on the configuration menu on the website. Many of these are also available on the system settings page. For example, assigning the various control slots to an external MIDI controller if you want more faders or additional knobs to control a preset's parameters so that you don't need to page up and down between parameters. Over on the Mini, you've got a more limited system menu, which doesn't give you much control except the brightness. you do have access to additional parameters on the configuration page. Okay, let's take a closer look at using the preset editor. For that, I will load up an empty preset. Note that this bank is already full. I'll go to bank 2 and let's say go to here to an empty slot. The process is identical, by the way, for both controllers. You go into My Presets and hit Create New Preset. In this case, I'm creating a new preset for the Mark II. And then you just choose a control and drag it onto any empty slot. All of these have different options, which you can see if you press up here. Dials aren't supported on the Mark II, by the way, but if I wanted, say, a thin fader, then I can drag that over here. Or if I wanted a relative controller, I can drag that over here or over here as well. And then you edit the parameters just by pressing these and, say, changing the color, choosing the displayed minimum and maximum values. So, for example, if I wanted this control to go from, say, -50 to +50 and default to 10 as a bipolar controller, let's send that to the Electra 1. So as you can see, I've got my bipolar controller here and the other controllers as well. I can choose the message type like I showed you earlier. There's MIDI learn here as well. It can be double byte or not. The list parameters are pretty interesting. There are two options here. Let's go for a list and then we can edit the options over here. Click edit. You can draw whatever you want for each option. Add additional options, relabel these, and let's label this one as well, and draw something here. And we should leave this one without a drawing as well. Anyway, hit send to Electra, and our fancy list is here to either long press to edit or just to control as usual. So those are lists. I think the other options are pretty self-explanatory. You already got a glimpse of the different envelope types previously. Let's drop one here. I already showed you the XY controller and the multi-fader controller. Groups are just visual ways to group together buttons. This doesn't have any functionality. You can just choose a width, let's say 3 columns, and relabel a group. And once we're happy with everything, just send it over to the Electra 1. So that's basic preset editing. If you want to convert a preset from the Mark II, say, to the Mini or the other way around, just hit the split screen view. This is where you can design another layout for the preset. Let's go for the Mini, and then you can just drag and drop the controls to the location that you want them. The Mini isn't currently connected to my computer, but if it was, just hit play and it would appear over here. So that's pretty much as far as you can go without touching code if you want to create presets like this one or presets like this one. Then Electra 1 comes with a full programming API based on the Lua scripting language. Now, normally when I make videos for this channel, I like to know what I'm talking about, but in this case, I didn't learn neither Lua nor Electra 1's API. However, I asked a couple of AIs around the house if they speak Electra 1 Lua, and they seemed pretty confident, so I gave it a shot. By the way, I created this preset on the Mini. Let's go to Bank 2, and it's over here, and then converted it to the Mark II in the split screen view that I showed you earlier. First, let me walk you through this preset. It's a generative note sequencer, and the visuals are based on the OP1's Tombola sequencer, but it works very differently. You don't feed it notes using an external controller. Rather, it automatically spawns new triggers, which are the balls that you see over here, and each time a ball hits one of the edges, it'll play a note pre-assigned to that edge from a certain scale. The number of notes selected from the scale is determined here. So it goes down to 3, which is a triangle, or more. And then you've got a note lifespan, or a ball lifespan, which is how many times it hits an edge before it gives up on life and disappears. And then you've got gravity, which can be either non-existent, and the balls just float, and you can give them a speed boost, or you can add gravity, in which case they'll fall down and you can determine how much they bounce when they do. You've got the speed of the tombola. That's bipolar, so it goes both ways. And you can also hit the scale dice button, which will randomize the scale. And there are a bunch of interesting scales in here. And of course we can then change how these are played on whatever synth we used this with. I think this is a nice way to learn or to experiment with different scales. So it's very easy to get carried away with this. So how did I build this, you ask? What I did was I took the demo cube project, that's this guy, and I uploaded it to the free version of Claude Code. And this is really a horrible prompt. This was just my first time. I wanted to get things going, and I asked Claude to copy the OP1's Tombola. It actually got it wrong, but came up with an interesting alternative concept. So now that we're doing something original, I went ahead and downloaded it and went into the Cube script, hit the Lua tab, and copied and pasted that code into here. The result was, it didn't work. I got this error message, so I gave this error message to Claude, and it claimed to fix everything and give me another file to download. And guess what? That didn't work either. Sorry, I lost my patience here a bit. And then Claude gave it some thought, gave me another file, and I still got a few errors. I didn't give up, and it started working. So as you can see, there were a few rendering errors, and then a few more back and forths, and slowly but surely, it started working really nicely into what we have today after a few prompts back and forth. And at some point I had to upgrade to the $20 version of Claude Code, but I actually got pretty far without it, by the way. If I go in here and load up my Tombola preset and hit edit over here, this is the Mark II version. Basically, to have this layout communicate with Lua, I just gave each control its own CC, chose whether it was bipolar or not, gave it its minimum and maximum values if it was, and then you need to choose virtual message type as opposed to these other ones. This custom control is where the script shows up, and the result is this 800-line code version of this, which I didn't write a single line of. It may have additional bugs or may not. I'm going to share this on the public library so you can take it from here if you like and change it even further. Is this the most efficient way of making Electra 1 apps? I don't know, but it works. It's fun, and I have a feeling it's not going to be my last. By the way, if you want to send error messages back and forth to Claude, you'll see the messages here and in the debugger. And don't forget to use the console to see how MIDI messages go back and forth. Okay, let's move on and talk about DAW support. Unlike some controllers which come with DAW support built in, Electra 1 doesn't. I already mentioned the integrations by third parties. I just want to take a little bit of a closer look at the Ableton Live one. There are pretty good videos here for the other ones. This script was written by this person, which I dare not say their name because I don't want to mangle it. There's a free basic version and a paid, more comprehensive version with support for more devices and additional features. A proper integration for the Electra 1 Mini wasn't available for testing as of the making of this video, but I'm told it's coming. Let's take a look at the integration for the Mark II. This is the premium version. The free version of the remote script lets you control the session mixer and the parameters of the currently selected device. So as I go back and forth between the devices, that appears, let's get out of this. Hang on, that appears over here. You can see these custom layouts. These are supported in the free version only for the devices in Ableton Live Intro. The premium version includes nice presets for the devices in Ableton Live Suite. Beside that, the premium version also has all these additional pages like channel EQs, sends, transport control. So again, this is the premium version. It lets you select devices from across the session. It also lets you launch clips using the session control layout. I did notice a few bugs and crashes here, which I reported to the creator. It's also got some pads and a performance page. So quite a lot in here. I did notice a bit of lag as you swap devices. So you can see I click the button and it takes it maybe a second to load the parameters. Not too bad, I think, overall. Once you load up a device, then parameter controls seems pretty instantaneous to me. The premium version is 25 euros, and I think it's worth it if you use Ableton Live a lot. Certainly if you spent what you did on this as a controller. Hopefully some or all of these features will be coming to Mini. Okay, let's talk about pros and cons for the Electra 1 controllers. On the pros side, On both, you get to see the full name and the value of parameters you're controlling, something that you'd think is obvious, but is pretty rare on MIDI controllers, though of course this comes at a cost. Any other controller with the same number of knobs or buttons, and even more, with no individual screens for the parameters, would cost much less. We're starting to see controllers with one screen for all the parameters, which is better than nothing, but still not the same. Not only that, if the person who made the preset put in a little effort, you'll see relevant graphics appear. The visuals can be relevant to the object that you're controlling. All these without any Lua scripting, and if the person that created the presets put in a little bit more effort, then you can get relevant visuals as well. These controllers are very easy to program using the web-based editor. You can't program them on board the device itself. And a major pro is the very large database of community presets that people have already created for them. Note, by the way, these are mostly for the Mark II, so if I filter this just by Mini, as of the making of this video, this just came out, so there aren't that many presets available. My guess is that as this gets to the hands of more people, we'll be seeing more over here. But regardless, converting a patch, like I showed you earlier, from the Mark II to the Mini isn't rocket science. And what these can do is truly endless if you consider the comprehensive API and Lua programming language. So those are the pros. Then on the cons side, first, if you don't mind not having the parameters name on screen next to the control, there are plenty of less expensive options. But if per knob labels is something that's important to you, as it is for me, so that you see a parameter's value before you change it, you see what a knob does before you touch it, then I don't think price is much of a con here, especially as far as the Mini is concerned. If you look at other competing controllers with screens, you've got the FaderFox EC4 and the Oxy E16 with only 4 characters per knob and not nearly as comprehensive display options as you see here, though they do have 16 knobs and not just 8 or 12. Competition gets a bit stiffer with the Roto Control from Melbourne Instruments. Pros for the Roto Control include motorized knobs, which are especially useful for giving haptic feedback when selecting from lists, which doesn't work as well with endless encoders. Roto Control also has a built-in motion sequencer, though there are already a few MIDI effects and MIDI LFOs available for these, and with Lua you can make any kind of motion sequencer you like. That said, there's something compelling about having automation immediately available as opposed to requiring a script. None of the controllers I mentioned are programmable with a custom scripting language like these are. Then, just a general note, at least as of what's available here now, keyboard-based controllers with dedicated arpeggiators and sequencers offer a much faster workflow for basic tasks, though of course they can't compare with more creative and complex ARPs and sequencers that might be programmed by the community. Then a few things on the firmware side. Remember, there are differences between the Mark II and the Mini. Hopefully we'll see more and more of these features over here. I think there should be a way to auto-convert presets from the Mark II to the Mini and vice versa, as opposed to the current situation where you need to do it manually. And then I found a few bugs here and there, which I won't get into because Martin fixed them very quickly once reported. I'm just saying that there may be more since these are fairly complex devices, so be sure to report bugs if you find any. So that's it for the Electra One controllers. I'll be covering using AI coding tools to make your own musical apps in my ever-expanding book of electronic music ideas, tips, and tricks, available to the people who support this channel on Patreon. Hit like if this was useful, ring the YouTube bell below if you want to make sure you don't miss the next one. Thanks for watching.